welcome to the Buffs show. I got Dale Stanford here with me. He's with PRMI Residential Mortgage. Today we're going to talk about basically all things credit. Us as agents, we have a common question or common friction that we get every time we start working with a brand new buyer. They start thinking like, hey, we're in a position where we want to be to purchase a property, but they always give us, not always, but a lot of times they give us a lot of friction on wanting to start the conversation with the lender. And I think that has to do with the credit.
Yeah.
That's what they always bring back to us, is they don't want to hurt their credit if they're not going to actually move forward and purchase a property. But the reality of it is you don't know if you can purchase a property or if you can't purchase a property if you don't start that conversation.
Right.
So I'm going to turn the time over to Dell. He's going to kind of go through what that pre-qual process looks like for the buyer, how it affects credit, and then we're going to dive into all that.
So much to talk about. We'll try to be concise and make it straightforward, but it's super important to do that pre-approval. So I just was thinking about, like, in other aspects of our life, think about like if your car has a problem, right? Like you can call a mechanic and over the phone say, hey, here's what's going on. You can get kind of an idea, and they might be right? Maybe 30% of the time they nail it. You could take it in to someone, they could drive it around. You're going to get a little bit better information of maybe what's wrong with it. But I mean, until they really do a diagnostics and they kind of dive into it, they may be misdiagnosing it, or like with a doctor or a home inspection, right? It's like, to do a pre-approval, my opinion is you just need to do it the right way. Like, if you're interested in looking at a house, you don't want the surprise of going down the road and then realizing, oh crap, I don't qualify, right? And so what we do is we do it the right way. We do a full-blown pre-approval. And so one of the worries that people have a lot of times is, oh, I don't want my credit pulled. Well, again, it's like that example of just talking to the mechanic over the phone and saying, hey, here's what's going on with my car, what's wrong with it, versus really finding out. And so step one, I would say, is the home buying process. Number one is you've got to be with a great realtor, right? Step number two is to get pre-approved and to do it the right way. So I think one of the objections you think clients bring up a lot is just the credit, right? They don't want their credit pulled.
Yep.
So in the mortgage pre-approval process, there's a lot of things we look at. We simplified it. We use the acronym CIA, right? So it's credit, income, assets. So we look at all of them, but arguably the most important is the credit. Because if your credit score is too low, there's not much we can do. If your income's low, there's some things we can do. If your assets are low, we have zero down loan programs, right? So they're all important, but the credit is really where we need to start. So without that, it's almost pointless to say, hey, I'm pre-approved. So there's three different levels, just like the example I used earlier with the car. I mean, I could talk to a client over the phone or in person, and run through scenarios and say, okay, yeah, based on what you're telling me, you should be good for this, right? The next level is let's do a loan application, let's pull credit. We need to pull credit to be accurate. Now there's another part of that though, because a big buzz in the industry now is let's just do a soft pull instead of a hard pull.
Right.
So here's the thing with the difference between soft pulls and hard pulls. Soft pull is great. It's going to be maybe like the mechanic driving the car around and doing that. But from my experience and from research and talking to other colleagues in the industry, soft pulls are accurate, they're good, but they're probably 90-95% accurate, right? So there's that scenario, it's rare, but there's a scenario when maybe the soft pull doesn't catch everything or give us all the information we need. And so if I'm issuing a pre-approval off of a soft pull, it's going to be right almost always, but I want to be 100% right? Like if you're going to take the time to go out and look at a house and get excited, and especially if you go under contract and you pack up and you're making arrangements. I mean, there's a lot involved in lining that all up, right? The last thing you want is to get down to the finish line and find out, whoops, we don't qualify. Statistically across the nation, I've heard different numbers, but somewhere between 20 to 37% of people that get pre-approved actually get denied in the end. The pre-approval is not accurate, or the amount's off or something, right? So to me, I think, man, that's way higher than it should be, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's either, 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 3 people are being denied when they thought they were approved. So to really shop for a house, I think you need to just go through the process. You just need to, and it's not that hard, honestly. Like, we basically do a loan application. We can do it in person, we can do it by Zoom, we can do it over the phone, or you can fill out an application online. So that's step one, easy. Step two, you just upload documentation. It's not that much. It's pay stubs, bank statements, W-2s, photo ID. I mean, for the most part, that's it. Sometimes we'll need something more. And then at that point, just authorize us to do a full-blown hard credit pull. Now, the worry that people have with a credit pull is that it hurts their credit, right? I think that's very misunderstood in the industry, because it does impact the score, but it's very little. If someone has good credit, 740 credit score or higher, that one inquiry, even though it's a hard pull, usually drops the score 1 to 3 points is all.
Oh, cool.
So no big deal. Now, if they don't have a lot of credit history or they have poor credit, it could impact their score of 3 to 5 points. But the thing is, you have to have your credit pulled anyway to get an approval. So my opinion is, I mean, if you're thinking about buying a house, just do it. Like, it's not that hard. Do the application, provide the documentation, authorize a full credit report or a credit pull, and then we can tell you exactly what you qualify for.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think of a scenario where you have a buyer who they're not quite ready to buy a home. They're still 6 months out, and they know that, but they do want to have an idea as to what it is they're qualified for.
Yeah.
In that situation, would you advise a soft pull so that you can have a fairly accurate, tell them, hey, this is not 100% accurate, but it's pretty close.
Yeah.
If you're 6 months out on purchasing a home.
It's a great question, and honestly, you could argue it either way. My opinion is that to just do it right the first time, because the thing is if we do a hard pull now and it impacts your score, let's say 3 points, that's very little. I mean, that's probably not going to make any difference. I mean, it could potentially change you from one tier to another, but the thing is over time that impact lessens, right? So it becomes less and less of an impact. So usually, a few months down the road, that inquiry has no longer any impact. So I think even if you're 6 months down the road, just do it the right way. Like, get the right diagnosis, right? Get the right information, provide all the information. We'll give an accurate pre-approval, and then you're good to go, right? Occasionally there's surprises on credit reports, right? Sometimes there's errors. Sometimes there's things that you didn't know about. The most common surprises are medical related, because, hey, insurance was supposed to pay this and they didn't, so now there's a collection account, or sometimes people pay a balance off, they think, but by the time they send it in, there's now a $3 remaining balance, and so it's crazy, but then now this lingering balance ends up making a late payment. You just don't want any surprises. So I say we do the full-blown deal. It affects the score very little, and then you're good to go. Now, the credit report lasts for 4 months. Cool. So if we pre-approve someone, as long as they close within 4 months, and we don't need to pull another one in most cases. If they do exceed that time frame because they haven't even started looking yet, I don't re-pull it again in 4 months. We don't re-pull it again at all until they're actually under contract, because, unless something dramatic has changed over that period of time, then we roll with the pre-approval we have. And then once they go under contract, or right before going under contract, we'll just update everything again.
Okay, cool. Awesome. And then another thing I do want to talk about is building credit. So let's say they come in and they have their credit pulled and they have a pre-approval going, and then we find out their credit's a little bit lower. Okay. What are some options, some basic steps that people can take to help build credit?
Okay, great question. So what a lot of people don't know, I mean, everyone knows that if you make a late payment, it's going to hurt your credit score, right? Like, everyone knows that. What most people don't know is that your payment history only accounts for 35% of your credit score. Okay. So, it's super important. It's the most important category. But what most people also don't know is that 30% of your credit, so almost as important as paying bills on time, is your credit utilization ratio. Credit utilization ratio is the balance on your credit card compared to your limit, right? So that is something that we can do a lot with. So again, it's another reason why I advocate just doing the full-blown pre-approval in the beginning, because we can help you get your credit score up. We have some software tools that are amazing, one called Credit Expert, and what it'll do is it'll go in and analyze the the client's individual credit report and tell us exactly what they need to do to maximize their credit score. Okay. It's incredible. We've improved people's credit scores sometimes up over 100 points. Sometimes even we improve it by 15, 20 points. That moves them into another tier where you get better interest rates, your mortgage insurance cost is less, or it may be the difference between qualifying or not qualifying. So that's super important. So that is a huge aspect of it. And again, another reason why we need to pull the credit. We can't run that credit expert analysis off of someone saying, hey, I pay my bills on time, right? Like we have to have the credit report. And so once we get it, then it goes in and the algorithm integrates with their credit report and kicks out, the results that we need to go after. So
awesome. Okay.
So yeah, that makes a big difference. And then that accounts, those two categories account for 65% of the score. And then the rest is just other things that we can advise the client with. Once we see their credit report, we can kind of map out a game plan of here's what we need to do to improve the score. The least impactful aspect of all of these things is that credit inquiry. It does have an impact, but it's the least impactful of all the things that lead into that score.
Gotcha. So you're able to do more with the knowledge or just having the full credit report to build credit than what that credit poll would impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because again, 1 to 3 points with good credit. If you don't have good credit, it's only 3 to 5 points. And we have ways to improve the score, yeah, exactly, way more than the impact of the credit inquiry. So one, if we pull the credit and it's great, then thumbs up, you're approved, you're good to go, you have peace of mind. If it's not where we want it to be, now we can craft an exact plan to get your score improved.
I know we had a client in the past who you actually did that with. You were able to work with him and his family. They did have a credit pre-approval. They had their credit pulled, and you were able to work with them and keep up with them for, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 months, and we turned them around. We were able to get them into a property.
Absolutely. So I really think the sooner you do it, the better, right? So even if you're 6 months out or 3 months out, let's just go through the process. Let's just know where we're at, because the difference in credit score, like we said, could make a big difference in the interest rate, the total monthly payment, the different loan options. So yeah.
And maybe something we can start advocating a little bit more on my end as an agent is, if you are hesitant but you're 6 months out, go get the full approval done. That way you can then start working with the lender to improve your credit, or not only to improve your credit, but to get you in the best financial situation to close on a property and then be set up the best way you can be if it is 6 months down the road.
Yeah, I mean, this discussion is mostly on credit, which is huge, but there's so many other aspects too. Like a big thing that I really am passionate about is, like, what is the best loan for each client, and not just saying, hey, here's what you qualify for, off you go. It's, well, okay, so how much money do you have to work with? Do we want to do a 0 down loan? Do we want to do a 3% down conventional, 3.5% FHA, 5% conventional, on and on and on. Like, there's so many different loan programs, and then within the loan program, how do we want to structure it? Right. There's ways that we can use money or seller contribution to buy out the mortgage insurance up front, so they don't even have it in their payment at all. There's a lot of different ways to work through it. And so the other thing is, if a lot of times clients will hop online and do an online calculator. Mortgage calculators online are perfect when it comes to the principal and interest, but that's it. Like, they're not very good on taxes and insurance, and they're even worse on mortgage insurance, right? So to get a full comprehensive picture, you may think that a house payment or a house price is this payment, and that may be right, but it may not be too. So.
Well, especially like right now, the way the market is with what we're experiencing is almost every client I'm working with right now is getting up to 2 to 3% in closing costs. The market's a little bit stagnant, it's a little bit slower at the moment. It might start picking up here soon, but every buyer is getting closing costs. And so what we are able to do with those closing costs is, significantly different or significantly better than just bringing the purchase price down. You know what I mean?
It almost makes no sense in a way to go home shopping without knowing the numbers, right? So number one, what we're going to do is we're going to answer all your questions. Number two, we're going to figure out how much you qualify for. legitimately really qualify for it by doing it the right way. And then 3, we're going to talk about what does it look like with cash to close, how much do you need out of pocket, and what's your total monthly payment. Right, so you kind of need to have all that information to really be a smart shopper.
I think one thing a lot of buyers forget about is the closing costs. They think, hey, we've got 3.5%, 5%, whatever it is down for this purchase price, we can afford that. But you got to calculate in usually an extra 1 to 2% for closing costs.
Yep.
And I think most people don't.
Absolutely, it's huge. It's a huge factor, right? Because it's potentially a lot of money. But then we also can craft these game plans, just like you mentioned with the seller paying closing costs. So do we use that to go towards closing costs? Do we use it to buy down the rate to get a lower payment? Do we use it to buy out mortgage insurance? There's a lot of different ways to use that.
Absolutely. So just to recap, today we wanted to talk about credit and getting your credit pulled for a pre-approval and what that process looks like and how that affects your credit. Ultimately, doing a full-blown pre-approval would affect your credit roughly 1 to 3, 4 points at most. And then you're able to have a really good understanding as to where you're at. And then from there, we can work further and build your credit ideally more than what that credit pull knocked it down.
Absolutely. Yeah, and one other thing too we didn't talk about is the cost. Credit report costs have gone through the roof for us as lenders. For me to do a hard pull, then this is a 3-file merge, all 3 bureaus, tri-merge credit, costs almost $100, right? And a soft pull is a lot less expensive. So sometimes I think when lenders are recommending a soft pull, they're doing it, they're saying, hey, we don't want to impact your credit score, but I think sometimes they're trying to save a buck. And so for us, I'd love to save the cost and expense too, because we're paying for it. We don't charge you for it up front. But I want to be accurate. That's why I like the hard pull, because we want to be 100% accurate. And then just one other thing, most AUS systems will allow you to run a pre-approval off of a soft pull, but not all of them. So that's the other thing. It's just doing the credit doesn't impact the score that much. And doing a hard pull is just really the better way to go.
Absolutely. And either way, especially here, if you're being serious about buying a house, you're going to have to do a hard pull eventually.
Got to do it eventually.
If you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot us a message. Dale can leave his contact and stuff like that as well. And then thanks for watching.
You bet. Thanks.